Hi everyone, it's Maha, and in today's video we're carrying on a new series of Back to Basics in Tableau and continuing off from our previous video on different types of data connections. But as you all know, before we get started, and if you haven't already, please subscribe and hit that notification bell icon to help me out with the creation of these videos. Now, let's get started. So, there are 4 different types of data connections in Tableau. They are unions, joins, blends, and relationships. And in this video, we'll be going over unions, relationships, and blends. And if you want to know more about joins, please watch my previous video. So, let's begin with unions. So unions are useful if you want to combine data by appending rows of one table to another table. Essentially, all that means is you want to add rows to your data. But there are some rules for this. You have to make sure that the tables you union have the same number of fields, the same field names, and the fields are the same data type. We'll go into that more in a bit detail later. Now, let's look at an example. So we have an example of a table of students that, let's say, study biology, and we have another table that we want to union them together that study maths. The table contains their name, their year, their sex, their biology, their subject, and their grade. And if we want to union them together, it would essentially look something like this, where we're just stacking the table on top of each other because, as I said before, we have the same number of fields and the fields have the same field name and they are the same data type. Okay, and you can also see that in Tableau, if you union, a new column will appear that tells us which table this information came from. So if you can see right at the end, we have table name, and it just tells us where that row originally came from. So the first one, Pearl, came from the table biology, whereas Sam came from the table of maths. That's all that says. So there are different ways you can actually union in Tableau. So we're going to go through that in Tableau. So let me just open Tableau up. So if we can see in Tableau, I have that same example up here. So what I'm going to do first is the quick and easy method of unioning. So let's say I bring biology to our data pane. So again, we have our name and all of our information down here. So if I want to union this to maths, which is here, what I can do is I can click on maths and I can drag it on top of biology. So we can see here, we have the union that highlights. As long as it highlights, just drop it in there. And then you can see that it's the same as the example that I showed you in PowerPoint. It basically just stacks each other up, and we have that table name in the corner here that shows us where our information, which table our information came from. So let's just go back again. So another way you can do a union is when we have one of our tables on the data pane, we can right click on this drop down arrow, and right at the bottom it says convert to union. So we have either a specific manual way where we can again drag in our maths into here and click apply. It will give us the same thing as what we saw earlier. Or we can use a wildcard, which is automatic. So in this wildcard, it basically says we're going to include the sheets of, if you leave it blank, it includes every single sheet in my Excel. So I'm going to have biology, English, and maths. So we're going to leave it blank, or it depends on how you write the sheet name. So for example, if you have like here, you can use an asterisk to match any string characters. For like their examples, they have their sales asterisk means it will union every single tab that has the word sale first and whatever else. So what we're going to do is we're going to leave it blank. So we're going to drag in biology, English, and maths, and let's see what happens. So here, what actually happened is I have made biology different to maths and English. So before we do anything, let's just remove all of this and let's just drag in English. So then I can just show you what I mean. So here you can see English has a table of name, year, sex, subject, and grade. So it's very similar to biology and maths. The only difference is the way it's written, the field names are different. So if we go back to unioning all of the sheets together, so in this example, we can see that the fields have different names. So the English table is different to maths and biology. And if the tables have different names, Tableau will create a new field for these results and a lot of nulls will appear. And that's basically what's been happening here. So this can be corrected by highlighting both the fields. So for example, I can select name and I'm going to control and click on this name field because they're meant to be the same. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and it says merge mismatched fields. And we can see that is name and name. And again, we're going to double click and we can rename it to just name. And now we can see that it includes all of our English, maths, and biology. And we can keep doing that for each column. It will take a very long time to do that. Hence why I told you at the beginning, make sure your tables names are the same. Otherwise, you're going to have to do this, which is time consuming, especially if you have a lot of columns of data. But yeah, so that was unions. So now let's move on to relationships. So relationships are very dynamic and a flexible way of combining data from different tables. So you can remember in our previous video, we spoke about these lines called noodles that represent the relationship between different tables. And the relationships relate the tables together on common fields, but it does not merge the tables together. You can think of it sort of like a contract between the two tables, and then Tableau will build an appropriate join when you query these tables. There are a couple advantages of relationships, and they are that the relationship is easier when combining data and more intuitive compared to join. They remain separate. So the tables remain separate and they're distinct tables. So remember, they don't have, when you do have a relationship, it doesn't create a new table like in the joins. So there's also, it's automatic. So you only need to select the field to define the relationship. The good thing about relationships compared to joins are multiple tables at different levels of detail are supported in a single data source. So you can use different levels of details when using relationships, but you can't do that with joins. So you can build data models that contain more tables and reduce the number of data sources needed to build a viz. There's also no accidental loss of data by unmatched measure values, and it also avoids data duplication and filtering issues that can sometimes result from joins. So some of the requirements of relationships to work are you need to keep in mind that when you're using a relationship that is unclean data, meaning that the tables are not structured well, and it can make the relationship very difficult and very complex. So bear that in mind. Also, if you have a field that needs to define the relationship, it must have the same data type. We spoke about this in the previous video. We can't use published data sources, and we can't define the relationship on a geographic field. So now we'll finally move on to blends. So blends provide a quick and simple way to bring information from multiple data sources into a view, but unlike relationships and joins, blends never combine the data directly. Instead, what happens is a blend will query one data source independently, creating the results at that level, and then it will present the results together visually in the view to the other data source. To say again, blends don't create a new blended data source, hence they can't be published as a new single, let's say, blended data source. And the blends basically only happen on a sheet level. So if we're looking at, before we go into Tableau to see an example of this, I'm just going to go over two tables that we're going to bring into Tableau to do some blends on. So for the first one, we have the dog groomers table, which is just two columns, one with employee and which company that they work for. And we'll have another table, which we're going to bring in, that shows us only the companies and how much the companies pay per hour to be a dog groomer, for example. Now let's experiment in Tableau with some blends and see what happens. To create a blend, you would need two data sources. So first we're going to bring in our first data source like normal. So we're going to go into Microsoft Excel, bring in dog groomers. We're going to bring in our dog groomers in here. So we have our employee and our company, and we're going to go to a worksheet. So we're going to bring in any field of our choosing from the data source, and let's just say we're going to bring employee. Okay. So then what we're going to do is we now need to add a new data source, and this can be done by going right at the top here. We can see an image of a data source with a plus button, and we can click on that to input a new data source. Again, we're going to go into Microsoft Excel, and we're going to go into dog groomer's salary. We're going to bring in our dog groomer's salary, only has company and salary. We're going to go into sheet 1. There we go. So right here at the top left corner, you can see that we have dog groomers and dog groomers salary, and we can tell which data source we're currently using because of this blue tick here. Now, if we go onto our second data source, and we can drag in any field of our choosing. For this example, we're going to drag in company, and we're going to drag that in. And then you can see that a chain link icon appears. So this basically means that we have now blended our two tables together, and it's been linking on the field of company between the two. So in order for Tableau to know how to combine the data from multiple sources, there must be a common dimension between the data sources, and in our case we know that is company. And this common dimension is called the linking field. So the active linking fields are identified in the data pane for the secondary data source with that linking icon right here. And there's potential linking icons that can be identified with a broken link. And if you click on that broken link, it then becomes an active one. So for example, if I get rid of all of this, in our dog groomers, if I bring in employee over here and go on the dog groomer's salary, we have a broken chain link icon. And if we click on that, we could just say now they are linked on both companies. It's also very important to remember that whatever you bring as your first view, so your first data source, it will restrict the values from your secondary data source. So it's very similar to a left join, but it's not a left join. And you can check out my previous videos on joins if you're unsure about what a left join actually is. So for example, we can see here that when I bring in the employees first and link it to company, so let me just link this to company, you can see that the companies that only appear now are C, B, and A, although our companies in our secondary data source was actually from A all the way to E. But because our original first data source that we linked is going to be from dog groomers, because we've dragged in the employee. So that is now our first data source. And because our secondary data source is now company, it won't have the A, D, and E because in our first data source, we didn't have those companies. We only had A, B, and C. But if I do it the other way around, so let's clear this. And if I go from company from A, B, C, and D, and E, and if I go from dog groomers to look at our employees, I can drag that in and see here that we only have employees Sam and Daisy, and we have this asterisk that appears on company B. Now, this asterisk is actually very common in blends. It just means that there's multiple values in this field, which is mainly when you bring in non-aggregated values such as a dimension. And in our example, it was names. And the Tableau just doesn't know how to show the value basically. So remember in our original, if I clear all of this, in our original employees table, we can see that Lucy and both Phil were working for company B. And that Lucy and Phil are both what are now set as an asterisk. That's all that means. So the blending and the joins are not the same. The key difference is when a join occurs, the data is joined and then aggregated. But with a blend, it's aggregated and then it's joined. Hence why you can get asterisks that appear. I hope this video was helpful to have a beginner's understanding of what these connections are. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye.